So you can see your beautiful faces there. Well, at least from some of us. And these guys, you're the lucky ones. The ones who are not here, well, they prefer to do homework another way. No problem with that. The first question that you should always answer when you're in this kind of meetings or in any meeting is, why are you here? What is the answer to that? Of course, you can say because I say so, because I ask you to be here, because you don't want trouble, or because you're interested, whatever the reason you're here. Of course, I also have my own reasons. Why are you here? And one of the reasons for you to be here is to improve the quality of the scientific research. And if you don't agree with me, well, you may have something, some disagreements, but I hope you share one of the passions about the job that we do, the work that we do, is one of the most exciting things, scientific discovery of our time. But scientific discovery doesn't come for free. What does it take to do proper scientific discovery? What does it take for that? Well, scientific discovery, it takes some of the things that you may already know, like doing your homework, doing the literature review, planning your experiments, and so on. But there are some things that we have. I'm not sure we have had this kind of talks in this meeting, in this group. And these are what you must not do and what must you do. So these are the two things that I would like to be very explicit in our group. And I will not go to the very detailed. So I plan to keep this seminar very short and go to the point. The first thing, I will go to these two parts: what you must not do and what must you do. And many of these things you will see like are very obvious. So not to make it too detailed, I will share with you once again. I have done it many times, but I will do it once again. I will share this document. Is a set of rules, a set of recommendations by the European Union on how to do proper research. And interestingly, this starts by defining what is scientific research, what is research. And there are many things here that once you read it, you may agree or disagree with it. It happens to me also. But one of the things that we all must agree are the principles. What are these principles? And it's interesting that they put reliability as one of the main things, one of the main characteristics here, is ensuring that whatever you're going to do is something we can trust. It's of the highest quality. And indeed, in the part of the what we need to do, I will start with that one. What must be done? What is the main characteristic of scientific research? Is this a good translation for that?
Yeah.
How do you say it in English?
Repeatability.
Yes. Yes, reproducibility. So what is reproducibility? Even if you guys don't understand, because I mentioned to the new students a couple of times and they didn't get it, or they couldn't say it in Russian. I don't know if you. So the usual way, what you do when you don't know something, of course, you go to Wikipedia and at least you get to this level. So it means not just an experiment, but also means the analysis of the results that you have. So there are three ways in which you could fail reproducibility. Well, first of all, what is reproducibility? It means that you repeat the experiment, or many times you do the analysis, processing of that experiment, and you obtain the same results. That's what it means, reproducibility. But something critical about reproducibility, and not just reproducibility, that is something you can do. Replicability there is a small difference I would like to point. This replicability is more about the reproducibility by other people of your results, that your results, your study can be replicated. And this is a cornerstone of scientific research. It's absolutely essential to scientific research, that you can reproduce your findings. And something that maybe you didn't know, that reproducibility is not only, or something very simple that we put it is reproduce experiments. This is one of those things. But it's not only that, it's also reproduce the analysis and the processing of the experimental results. So, and what is the example? One simple example that happens to us, you can go to any of the main materials that we're working on, and we say that what is called laser-induced reduced graphene, for example, laser-reduced graphene oxide. What is the finding there? Well, it's not a finding of ours. It's a finding that is well established in the literature. In the, I don't know, 2008 or 2010, people used lasers to reduce graphene oxide. They found that it becomes more conductive. They call it reduced graphene oxide. So that was a finding that a group in, I don't remember if it was in, most likely the original paper was in the USA. And then that was something that could be replicated by different labs in the world, including us. That's something that we do a lot. So that's an example of when you can replicate the results, you bring something very important, value. So without replication, if you have results that cannot be replicated, then you don't have any value. And if you have value, well, what you're doing, what is what you're doing? What is the opposite of value? Any idea? So you could either be on one side or the other. Hardly you can be in both. So since the laser reduction of graphene oxide was something that can be replicated, can be used in different labs, we started doing it. And that, what did that allow? What was possible to obtain after following those works? Well, as you already know, in our work, there was something called LMOG. When we started working with this, it was very exciting. It's still very exciting. We're still working on this part. What other thing happened after that? Well, LIMP came into life, and the latest one is LIPT. Yes. So all these different evolution that started with something that we didn't do. We didn't do this. But since it was proper scientific research, something that could be trusted, something that could be replicated, it was the seed, it was the starting point to many developments in our group. And this is the essence of proper scientific research. This is the essence of well carried out scientific research with reproducibility, and something that is particularly important that we're talking here. I'm not sure if to call it ethical scientific research. I will call it, I don't know, responsible scientific research. You can call it whichever way you want, responsible. Yeah, ethical, responsible. I will call it, besides that, I will also call it essential. If you don't have the characteristics of ethical, what people call ethical scientific research, well, I could give you also examples of what happens when you don't, and maybe we will see a little bit of that. What happens if you don't do it, if you don't follow this part? So this is an example, right, of what we can do. And of course, we are building on top of what was done in terms of laser-reduced graphene oxide. So do you think our results are reproducible? Do you think the main findings of these works are reproducible? Do you understand what does it mean to make something reproducible? Well, if you don't, remember something that you can reproduce experiments.
Depends what we are talking about.
I'm talking about reproducing the experimental results, that you make the same experiments and obtain the same results. In addition to the experiments, you also have to proceed with the same analysis and the same processing. So reproduce experiments, reproduce analysis, and you obtain the same results. Or the same conclusions.
Yeah, the thing is that we barely repeat the analysis for most of the things we do.
Well, there is a very simple, a very simple example. This is a very simple example in which you can barely screw up. So what is one of the basics of laser-reduced graphene oxide is that you use a laser and it becomes an insulator. From an insulator, it becomes into an electrical conductor. So that's one main conclusion of this, right? So is that something that is you have reproduced? Have you reproduced those experiments? Well, reproduce experiments is something that you do, or you used to do almost every day. Make a film of graphene oxide and laser irradiate. So reproduce experiments is not something that you don't do. I think you have done, if not dozens, hundreds of times even, right? Haven't you? Have you reproduced those experiments on laser-reduced graphene oxide? At least I know Gena has done it tons of times. Who else is here? Lena also, Lisa, Larissa is getting into that. So many of you guys have done that. Have done laser reduction of graphene oxide, or still doing laser reduction of graphene oxide. The main finding, the application of this, is the change in electrical conductivity. So the experiment itself, what is the experiment itself? Laser irradiated graphene oxide films. What is the analysis of that? Take laser irradiate the experiment and measure the conductivity, measure that it becomes conductive, right? What is the analysis of that and processing of that? Well, it's relatively simple. You take pictures, you measure with 4-point probe if you want to get a more quantitative idea about the electrical transport of the material, or simply multimeter. And what is the conclusions? The conclusion is, what is the conclusion? After laser radiation, GO turns into a conductive RGL. This is the conclusion. So I would like you to see this as an example of how proper scientific research is done, or the basic level. There are, of course, many details when I say reproduce the conclusions. What conclusions are we talking about? In this particular example, I'm talking about the change in conductivity. But of course, there are other questions, other conclusions that we're getting, like in LMOG, one of the conclusions that we got is that there is a removal of some functional groups. And that's something also that we verify. In LMOG or even LIMS in these two, sorry, in LIMS, not LMOG. What was the conclusion of that? What was the main thesis or thesis in plural of this work? It was the conductivity, changing conductivity in the integration of the material into the polymer. Was that reproduced? Was that reproduced by different people? How many people have worked with LIMS? Many of you, right? So that was reproduced.
I think with LIMS was the main one that we have a very good reproducibility.
Who will say that, Nelson?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of reproducibility, what is the conclusions? What is what you're claiming you're doing? The results, the conclusions you're getting at, and make the experiments and processing, not only you, other people to do it and find the same results. That's reproducibility. or a simple way, understandable way for you to understand reproducibility, and leave the same. So all these examples, they have the same common denominator in the in terms of reproducibility. Is that clear until now what reproducibility is?
Yes.
Do you have any questions about the reproducibility?
No.
No? Reproducibility.
Yeah, but actually, yes, about the analysis. I mean, sometimes we make something like Raman or any other characterization techniques once. And I don't know if you can claim something, obtaining on these results only once, and we are still doing it sometimes.
Yes, it often happens. So not only in Raman, I will tell you when it happens. That's an excellent point, Anya. So what Anya is saying, for example, I will tell you a particular examples in LIMS, something that happened with LIMS. There were experiments before we had XPS. XPS was like very fancy, right? Like we had to send the samples to France, to Germany, to China, etc. Okay, and those are experiments that they did only once, and that's it. So what is reproducibility there? Was that result reproducible? Very rarely.
What reproducible is talking about conductivity.
About what?
About conductivity.
That's a good point. Yes, that's a good point. So let's define. So in one result that backups your conclusion, like what we're talking in the case of LMOG or LIMS or all of this. I don't remember if we did XPS here, but I know that XPS is rarely reproduced. It doesn't mean that the conclusions of the results are not reproducible. So that's a distinction. The conclusions of the results are reproducible. Some part of analysis may be done once, and that's it. Another example that happens in our case with LIMP, let's remain on that. Raman spectroscopy. In some cases we saw, and you have seen it. You have seen it now that when you make Raman spectrum from your samples, what do you typically obtain? For the laser radiated samples, you obtain tons of background. Sometimes you get some graphene, amorphous graphene oxide, and sometimes you obtain different things. So what do you report? That's something critical. And it's critical when you know that your sample is heterogeneous. And in LIMP, we did it. I think in LIMP, in that case, for example, the presence of aluminum carbide, wasn't it? Or the presence of graphene, very good graphene, it doesn't happen everywhere. And what happened in our case, in that time, we didn't have Raman. Or did we?
Oh, I did it in TSU.
Yes, you got it in TSU. So what did we do? What was the ethical? Read the paper, read the manuscript, because this question was raised. How reproducible is result? I think even by Anya herself. How reproducible is that? How in the manuscript we say it. No, we need to make a special, I don't know if in the conclusions or part in the results. In the paper we mentioned, we need to investigate what is the spatial distribution of these changes. Okay, because it's not all the time like that. So, and that can be a very gray zone. Very gray zone when you are not completely honest with what you're getting. And we all are tempted to fall there. In not being honest with that part. So Anya, what question? This is address your question. And I need to do the same. Let's say, can you repeat your question? Your question was related to this, right?
Yeah, no, okay, I got it.
Yes.
You addressed.
So, but let's say this is something that can pass. But let's say like what Nelson's comment that is about electrical conductivity. That there is no chance that you make it only once and that's it. In that case, it will be. I'm sure you understand the difference, right? That you check only once.
Yeah, of course. I was talking about the other analysis, of course.
Okay.
More complicated.
Okay. So in that case, of course, there is no option but to reproduce. In the case that your main conclusion is based on a particular experiment, in our case, electrical conductivity or mechanical properties, you need to go with all what you have. reproduce and reproduce and reproduce. Now there is one question comes, like how many times does the experiment need to be reproduced? How many times the experiment needs to be reproduced?
At least 3 times.
Nelson. Oh, why do I put X times? Because says who? Who says it has to be 3 times? Why 3 times?
I say it at
Yes.
least. Of course, if
Yes.
more is better, more times is
Yes,
better.
yes.
But minimum
Okay,
3.
okay, yes, very good, very good. You say at least 3 times. That's a very good. That's a very good point.
Not only this, I think important.
What?
It could. I think that's not the point. How many times it must be performed. I think the important point that different people must follow the same protocol too, and see the shit if it happens.
But if you are going to report that, you have to show at least 3 times. Yeah, you can report it only with one
Yes,
experiment.
let's not argue. Yes, I'm not arguing. I'm just saying that the protocol must be checked by different people.
Yes. So we have at which level do we start? So what Ilya is talking is falls more into what we call replication. Okay, replication is by other people. They're practically the same. Use reproducibility and replication, yeah, or the reproduction of the experiments, replication of experiments. They're almost synonyms. But I would like to make a distinction. Replication is made by other people. Reproduction of experiments is made by you. Of course, we can say other people reproduce your experiments. There is no problem by that. But just to have the distinction between these two, these other people does it, and reproducibility is what you do. So how many times? 3 times. Will 2 times be enough? Will 2 times be enough? So what values can X have? You can have, of course, 3 times as you guys are saying, or it can have more than 3 times, or you can have 2 times. What happens if it has 2 times? Can you trust something that is reproduced 2 times?
No, that is like 50-50.
What do you mean 50-50? How can it be 50-50? And very good. So when you talk about reproducibility, sorry.
Like for
before I
example,
forget.
you have 2 results, two different results.
Yes.
If you do it only twice, you don't know which one is the correct one.
No, but if you reproduce it, if you do the experiments twice and you get the same, if you repeat the experiment and you get the same, can you trust that? I mean, you reproduce the experiment 2 times, you get to do all the process and you get 2 times the same result. Can you trust that? Is that enough?
I think no. The error bar could be extremely high.
Well, that's what we're talking statistically relevant. But if it's noise, what are the chances? If it's just a random something that happens once, what is the chance of happening it again?
The same.
Yes. Yes. So if it's random and that it will happen the same, and if it's just something random, it's unlikely that it will happen again. So I'm not saying that is enough 2 times. I'm saying that it depends. It depends on the situation. If you're making what I often call if you make a quick and dirty check, what does it mean, a quick and dirty check? How many times can quick and dirty check? It can be 1 or 2. If it's 1 time, quick, just check an hypothesis. So we have an hypothesis. If you do this experiment, you're gonna get this result, such result. Then you could go to the lab and you make a quick and dirty experiment to prove if it's the case or not. Now, quick and dirty is very tricky. Tricky because you can be too quick and omit some essential considerations that we should have. And and then you get to the wrong conclusions just because you didn't do it properly. So you need to be very careful with quick and dirty. Quick and dirty when you have a good understanding of what you're doing and what you're considering. So quick and dirty is useful often. So that can be once. And let's say you say yes, you verify your hypothesis. You verify your hypothesis, then you go to second, you repeat it, and you get the same results. You get more trust in the result, and that could be enough. So in some cases, making the experiment once or twice is enough. When I guys tell you make it quick and dirty, that's what I mean. Just check it out, and then you polish. But that comes to something else. That comes on something that I will talk in the end if we are not so bad with the time. Is that I don't want to tell you only, okay, you have to do proper scientific research. I also want to tell you some quick tips on the strategic way of how to do it, how to go about it. So I will come to that in a moment. So something that Ilya pointed out is that you need to do it. He mentions what is called error bar. And yes, what you're observing must be statistically relevant. Okay, that's a key. That's a key point when we say how many times you need to reproduce it. It has to be statistically relevant. Of course, if you do it 1 time, 2 times, it's not very relevant. It's not very statistically relevant. But it points you in the right direction or not in the right direction, and that's part of the strategy. Part of this of using quick and dirty, of doing quick and dirty, that's in itself a strategy. A strategy for what? When should you use quick and dirty? Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. Let's finish with this part. Reproduce at least X time. X time can be 3, 2, or 1, right? Ideally, at least 2 times. At least 2 times, if it's very critical. For example, doesn't make sense to reproduce if I will tell you, measure the contact angle of the film, and you measure and we put it in the paper. How many of you do it more than once?
I do it more than once. Everybody's doing it more than once for sure.
I always do.
Because the error is very high for this measurement.
Okay, what do you mean you're doing?
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it depends on which fields they want to do this measurement.
No, it doesn't depend. For
interesting.
watability, it is really.
No, I
You
mean,
have to
how
do
do you
it.
know if your samples are reproducible during the laser processing, for example? You bring the one big sample and make contact angle on the one sample 7 times.
We are not making it on one sample.
Yeah,
You
just
see?
example.
You see, that's a good example. So what do you mean? You will need to be very clear on reproducibility. Reproducibility doesn't mean applying the same experiment in the same sample many times. Does that mean reproducibility? Or does that mean, what exactly do you understand by reproducibility? So just to make it clear, reproducibility is the whole process, starting from the sample fabrication, the sample processing, performing the experiment under the same conditions, processing and analyzing the data following the same way. So it's not just taking the same sample and measuring at different points. When you do that, what you get is statistically relevant data points that it can allow you also to obtain an error bar, an uncertainty. So there is a distinction. On the same sample, on the same day, that's the same experiment that you're doing there. These are not reproducing different experiments. So Ilya, that's also the difference that Annie is pointing out. So you may do it on different, which both of you are completely right, but Ilya is more, is included, Ilya. When you make an contact angle on a sample, you don't just measure it on one location, that's it. You measure on different locations and you average to obtain also the statistically relevant result for that particular sample. But that doesn't mean reproducing the result. To reproduce the result, you need to do it again. So is this clear, guys?
Yes.
So do you reproduce the result in how many samples do you reproduce, Anya, when you do the contact angle experiments? How many
But
times
for
you
the
reproduce
quantity,
experiment?
already a lot.
Yeah, but don't bullshit a bullshitter. So you may in the same session you may have could make when you go and make your experiments you may have different samples made supposedly only under the same conditions, and then you go and you make they made the same day. Then you go and make 2 or 3 samples, I don't know how many, and on each sample you obtain many data points. But what is the real reproducibility? How would, after this discussion, how do you think it should be reproduced?
What do you mean by it?
So the way you're doing it, you're reproducing it, is you're making on the same day, you're making different samples, right? Under the same conditions.
Yes.
Yes, and that's great. By the way, guys, I'm not saying that's incorrect. That's exactly what you should do. But and then you take this.
You mean what is happening with the samples made on another day?
No. You make that. So, no, this is simple thing. No, nothing complicated. So you make the let's say 3 samples under the same conditions, same parameters. Then you take them and you analyze the contact angle. You measure the contact angle for each sample on different points.
Yes,
Right?
for each sample,
Okay.
5 points. Yes.
Now, guys, except Anya, was that experiment reproduced? So she did that, and she said, I reproduce the experiment. Is that true? Yes or no? It's a very simple question. Is that the reproducibility we're talking about? Well, if you don't know, Anya, what do you think?
Yes.
Yes, reproducible. Well, I will argue not necessarily. Not necessarily. If you go the next day,
Yes, of
And-
course. Yes.
and it
I mean,
happened
if
that-
you're
it
talking
happened-
about our surfaces, yes, of course, it is time-dependent measurement, of course, for sure. The comment is that we could. It is relevant for the freshly prepared samples, and for our films, of course, in a month, in a week, it would be different values.
no, besides that, Anya, so when we're talking about that everything is controlled, everything is in order, sometimes it is not like that, right? Sometimes we can, if you're under the hood, someone could have put something on your sample, could have, I don't know, Larissa could have come, opened something that is very reactive to dope her materials under the hood. And that
Then it is not
vapors
under the same
can-
conditions.
Exactly. So, but there are things that you don't know. And you don't cannot control. So if you don't know it, you don't know when it happens. So the real proof of reproducibility is making it in another day, repeat it another day. Start from zero, exactly start from zero another day and reproduce it. Because what you did under the same conditions, using that graphene oxide, you made different samples. What is the difference between that and just cutting the sample into pieces? And on each sample, you just make different experiments. So it's very similar. But the possibility is try another day, try another week. What is the ultimate?
Okay, we are not doing that.
Not often. What is the ultimate level of reproducibility? Well, I will tell you one example from Juan's paper last year. It was
Another
on,
day, another guy.
Yes, but I will tell you this example with Juan, for example, something reproducible. In Juan, we saw he's doing analysis on a sample that most people would say is boring. There is nothing to discover. It's completely boring sample. And we noticed some contrast in KPFM. It's HOPG, it's graphite. Graphite is graphene, it's a father of graphene. There shouldn't be any contrast. It should be very homogeneous. But we saw that it was not homogeneous. And we say, okay, it's not, maybe a mistake, maybe it's dirty. What do? We cleave it and we repeat the experiment. We exfoliate, we take a new sample. Then we take a new tip. Then we take a different machine. And that's in our own lab. And we reproduce these experiments. We observe, we see something that is observable. You can reproduce it in the lab. But the ultimate test is when it gets reproduced in different parts of the world by different people, by different graphene sources, graphite sources, different machines, different tips. That's the ultimate test. And that's exactly what happens with one paper with the collaborators in Italy and the collaborators in Austria, and even ourselves in Germany. We were able to replicate those experiments, those observations. That's a good example of reproducibility and replicability. So ultimately, yes, okay, it's not only the different person, which of course it has to be done. When Jane, unfortunately, she had until 2 a.m. She has lectures. She had lectures and doing some work, so she's still. I had to insist to her to remain in bed, not to wake up. But she will tell me it's essential in our research that someone else reproduce the experiment. So whatever you're doing is done, is something we can trust with. Other person in our group reproduces and sees the same thing. Okay, when we're talking about reproducibility, and unfortunately, I don't want this to stay only into reproducibility discussion, so we need to speed it up. When we're talking about reproducibility, we're talking about statistically relevant, which is what Anya is doing when she prepares on the same day many samples, and on each of those samples, she measures several points. That's to obtain that is to obtain statistically relevant data. When we do that, and Anya comes to me and she tells me, okay, this is the result I got. What is something that I have with Anya that I wish I can have with everyone else, everyone in the group? And part of this talk, part of this seminar training is to actually do that, to get there. What is what I have when Anya or anyone else comes to me? What we have is trust. I can trust what Anya is showing me. Is a fact. It's actually that is a fact. When you the separation between an idea, a guess, and a speculation. What is this? And what is the other one? And a fact. These are not the same thing, guys, right? You can have an idea, a guess, a speculation, a hypothesis. But that is not a fact. Are you aware of that? That your ideas, guesses, speculations are not facts. They are just that. But they can become facts. And how they can become facts? Reproducibility. Reproducibility is key. If you reproduce your experiment, you can have trust, and that idea, guess, can become a fact. So it's very simple. And this is not only about me. This is not that you need I need to trust you, or this is an universal characteristic of scientific research. When you have any of these, idea, guess, speculation, and that's the whole thing. You have this hypothesis, and you design your set of experiments. You design a process to prove or disprove your hypothesis. And once you prove it, you have a new piece of information. You have generated new knowledge. You have come up with a better way to make electrodes for health monitoring, or new materials for neural implants, neural interfaces, and so on. Only in this way. Okay. But don't get stuck here, and recognize when you're here in a guess and when you're in a fact. Okay, one of the parts of the universalities, why is this universal, is that it doesn't work only for you. I mean, you can come with an idea and make it a fact, but that happens all the time. That's what papers are about, right? So you can use that to build on. You can use those facts as a starting point, and that's exactly what we did when I told you about this. So we start with the laser reduced graphene oxide, so you can modify the properties of graphene layers, And from that, we build on that. Different new things. And all comes back to trust. Now, reproducing at least X times. Reproducibility, once again, there is a difference between making an experiment to obtain results that are statistically relevant and reproducing the experiment. Okay, I will repeat this statement. There is a difference between making an experiment that gives you statistically relevant results and reproducibility. These are not the same. Do you understand what I just said?
Yes.
What is the difference? Why aren't they the same?
Because reproducibility, it's a whole steps of your research from the beginning to the finish.
Exactly. Statistically obtaining statistically relevant results is part of the whole process. Very good. So there is a difference there. Okay. Now we came into one. I told you about one when one can be done. Now what happens? What happens when it's zero? What happens when you come to me and you show me a result that was done 0 times? How is that called? How do you call that?
Speculation?
No. What happens when you report a result that was done 0 times? How is that called?
What do you mean 0 times?
Fabrication.
Max said this, he paid attention to some lectures. Very good, exactly. That's fabrication. So then we come back here. Shit that you'll never do. So fabrication.
You mean you never did it? Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Yes. That you have never, you should have never done. Max, do you remember what is fabrication?
Yes.
Can you please say it in Russian?
Показывать несуществующий результат. Просто придумать результат и сказать, что он реальный.
So guys, clear? Juliana, you sleeping? Oh, Juliana is sleeping. Lisa, are you sleeping? The girls, Lena, sleeping?
No.
No? Lisa, can you tell me what Max said? What is fabrication in English?
Fabrication, it's the results what you never done, which you never done. Just imagine it.
Yes, yes, that's fabrication. When you, yes, that's fabrication. So very good that we understand what is fabrication. That's what is fabrication. Do you, okay, I'm not telling you, you don't make shit up all the time, guys, but in life, I mean that you bullshit up a little bit sometimes from time to time. In scientific research, no way at all. This is one of the first thing I put you in must not do, fabrication, making shit up. Never, well, now you understand it. So it's, you know, understand it's wrong, you cannot do that. Okay, it's kind of obvious, so I will not tell you why not. But all of these go down into wasting and losing trust. So you will generate waste. If you just run things that shit that comes from your mind, not real things, that's just waste. And trust is undermined. That's why part of what fabrication is so harmful, so bad. So that's what happens when reproducibility is 0 times. So give me an example of how you could fabricate in your research. Fabrication. Go ahead.
To properly fit some data.
No, that's not fabrication. We will come to that.
Why
We'll
it's
come to
not
that.
fabrication?
We will come to that. That's not exactly fabrication. Is something you should not do, but that's a different thing.
Yes, also
It could be
fabrication.
connected with reproducibility when you said that you reproduce the experiment. I mean, when you take the same sample and check the other region, but not the other sample, kind of it.
Yes, yes, guys, you have it. Ilya, that's a very, that's something that could happen in our group. Easily could happen in our group. Or what Gena said, what happens with this guy that he said he made some experiments, but he never did them. Well, in the end, I don't know if he just didn't know he was screwing up or whatever the reason it was. But yes, making experiments up. And this, what you mentioned, Ilya, is very important. If you guys, because you know you need to make the experiments many times, and you say, shit, I have done it so many times, I know what I get. I know that it's gonna work, but you never properly do it. And what does it mean properly do it? Record experiments, process them, analyze them. Yeah, you will say, I saw this was conductive, but you're not properly processing the results. And then I tell you, please reproduce experiments to obtain some error bar or so on, or to just to produce experiments. And you tell me, if you don't do it because you think you already know what you're gonna get, and you say, fuck that, yes, I reproduced them. I ask you, and you put in the paper, yes, it was reproduced 4 times, 6 times. It could have been not reproduced that amount of time, but you didn't even record it. You didn't record, you didn't go through the whole process, just some part of the process, not the whole process. Or you were too lazy and you say, I know it's something so basic, so obvious, everyone knows it's gonna work. And then you just lie. You just say, yes, I did it, and you didn't do it. That's an example. In what other way reproducibility could affect our work? Fabrication could affect our work. Well, making things up is very simple. I don't think we need to discuss. But creativity, guys, put your criminal minds to work and tell me how you could fabricate in your research, or in a group, not just you. How could it happen? So I guess no one has criminal minds.
Set with reproducibility, no? For
Yes.
example.
Yes, but something else.
Once.
Celia, anything else? Besides that, do you have another example of fabrication?
Yeah, but there can be many examples.
Give me one.
Anything which we're doing, we're stating that, okay, we get some.
Yes, that's the example of fabrication right now.
Okay.
Yes, some outstanding performance for this or for that, but actually there is nothing.
Mm. Well, that's a different thing. It's when we claim this is so amazing that's exaggeration. We know it's very good, but we don't know how much. That's different thing to fabricate. Fabricate means not having any result at all. What Ilya mentioned about fabrication was about saying that someone reproduces experiment many times. That's a very, very great zone. If you're so gentle in terms of fabrication, I will be a bit happy in that department because you understand. That's a minor infraction in terms of real fabrication. Real fabrication really means making up results, experiments that were never done, not even one time.
Kind of drawing in the paint?
Yes. Well, I don't know, you guys still use paint, but yes, drawing in the paint, that's it. Okay, so that's great. It's obvious. I think that everyone knew that before, right? I'm not rediscovering the wheel. What about, Sergey, something that you mentioned, not the fabrication part, but that you obtain we are under pressure, a very, very particular scenario. Let's say the TPU priority program, right? And the whole TPU priority also implies that we need to obtain breakthrough results. Okay, results from the highest level, scientific level, and technological level too. So then we obtain, and we always obtain, let's say, catalytic activity, or we obtain, yes, let's say catalytic activity, and we start changing the numbers in the curve. We obtain, let's say, a efficiency of 5%. And the record in efficiency in similar systems is 6%. And you say, okay, maybe if I change a little bit the surface area, recalculate the whole thing, I can get 7. How is that called, Max? Max already knows, right? Max?
Falsification.
Yes, Max doesn't know because he has done it. Max knows because he has been well, many of the guys here have been in a course where these basic things are taught. Yes, falsification. Falsification means you have your results and your results are not telling what you want. Falsification means changing your results, manipulating your results. Okay, sorry guys, I don't need to repeat this because this is here. And I would like you to also, once again, to use your criminal mind and tell me, how will you manipulate results? So falsification is well, you can read it there. Well, it says without justification. Of course, there is no justification, but there is always a reason for you guys to screw up. So one reason is, there are 2 reasons you could screw up. One reason is because of ignorance. You can say, I didn't know. Or you can say, everyone is doing it, so what's the problem if I do it too? Okay, that's your justification to screw up, or to screw up, or to do something that you know is not good. Justification, I didn't know. Second, everyone is doing it. Everyone else is doing it. Falsification, there is also behind that a motivation. The motivation is like one example I told you. You're under a lot of pressure to get those results, and then you fake your data. You not just you fake it, you manipulate your results. Okay, that's something that you cannot do. Obviously, you cannot do, and it's more important than that. In our group, if you do any of these things, you cannot come up with the typical excuses. What are the typical excuses? I didn't know, because now you do. Or these are the 2 typical excuses. Obviously, I didn't know you cannot do it because there is a recording of this, so even if the people who are not here, they are supposed to see it, to watch it. And if you're here, I will ask you the following question. Do you understand these things until now? Do you understand what I'm talking about now? Hey, am I sharing my screen now? Yes, I'm sharing my screen. Guys, is it clear? Or please, things clear?
Of course.
Yes?
Of course it's clear.
Yes.
Great. Then you cannot say you don't know. Now you do, if you didn't know. Now,
Okay, then we should sign some paper that I know what is fabrication.
There is a video here when you are saying that yes, there is evidence already. There's no need for signature.
Okay, who didn't say yes?
If someone didn't understand, please raise your hand. Did not understand. That's it. Everyone understands.
Yeah, but if person not paying attention now, how do you know?
There is a guy, Arsenic. Okay. Arseni, you will. Okay, I know, and thanks a lot, Arseni, for joining. I know that some of you guys, you're still working on your English, and my version of English is not also easy to follow. So give me 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes, and you will understand everything. Okay, just let me finish with the last point, and Max will help me giving you a summary. What is this? The last one? The last one is here. Plagiarism. Well, guys, I think I'm giving you the secrets to be I wouldn't say a good Russian scientist, but one of the cheatiest and easiest. This is the easy way. The easy way to be successful in science is do all of this. This is easy. You can make up results. You can falsify if you make an experiment. You have to make an experiment and you don't get what you want. You just can manipulate your data, or you can just steal from other people. You could do that. People do actually do that. People do plagiarism. What is plagiarism? I think all of you understand. It's just taking words from other people and using it, making it pass as if it was yours. That happens a lot. And I'm sure all of you guys have done it in a school, in bachelor, masters, I don't know, but not now. In our group, in scientific research in our group, none of these three failures can be done. Because if you do that, and we found you doing that, well, simply it means you don't belong to this group if you do any of these things. So let me write down the last one. The last one is plagiarism. Plagiarism. What does it mean, plagiarism? Plagiarism means you need to write your dissertation, or you need to write your paper, whatever, and you copy paste from the internet. Copy paste from different papers. And you say, okay, I'm very smart. I'm gonna just translate from Russian to English, so to mix it up so that this will be hard to find that it's copied from other sources and so on. But you're gonna do the same. It's just plagiarism. So the three things, there are many others, but the three most critical are these three: plagiarism, falsification, and fabrication. Manipulating without the results, without justification. Juan, give me an example of falsification without manipulating results without justification. Or Larissa. I can give you an example of falsification very quick. In AFM, also happens, you can manipulate the data. If you use filters or image processing, you could manipulate, and that's a very gray zone. When you say, okay, I'm just processing it to clean it, as sometimes you need to do, but you're actually manipulating it. So you need to be very clear or discuss with me when you don't know something that I typically ask you, show me the raw data and show me the processed data. That's very critical to know, because you may say, oh, I didn't know that was wrong. Well, I do know. So always show the raw data, how the raw data look like. So Ilya and Max and all you guys and Sergey working with Raman is the same. You could make a lot of processing to the spectra. You say, okay, it's a bit noisy, I'm gonna clean it. Or I'm gonna remove the background. And when you clean or when you remove the background, you can completely manipulate the data. And that gets into falsification. Okay, I'm giving you here 2 examples. In AFM image processing, you can manipulate the data to the point that you're falsifying results. Or spectra, Raman spectra, PL spectra, XPS, etc. You could, when processing the results, you could manipulate them. And that's falsification as well. So that's another point that I want to pass to you guys. Those 2 examples cannot happen in our group. And if they happen before, well, now you know they cannot happen. And how do you avoid that? Show always the raw data and the process data. That's also always very important to show it in the supporting information. So you're not wasting your time. Yes. Many of you do it, by the way. So most of you do it. So I'm happy about that part. So the three must not do. So Arsenic, these are the three things: fabrication, making shit up; plagiarism, stealing shit up from other people; and falsification is manipulating what the results you get. Maxime, can you do me a favor, or Sergey, one of you guys? Can you tell these three in Russian? And that these are the things that if anyone in our group happens to do, you will be very likely kicked out of our group. If you fail if you do any of these three, you will very likely be kicked out of our group. Can you explain that? First explain these three, and second, explain the gravity of doing that.
Ну, три вещи — это фальсификация, фабрикация и плагиат. И если в нашей группе это
Наверное, сказать
недопустимые вещи.
подлог, фальсификация и плагиат.
Нет, так называется фабрикация, фальсификация и плагиат. Что в нашей группе это все три вещи недопустимые. И если кто-то делает это и будет пойман, то наиболее вероятный исход — это прощание с человеком из группы. Как-то так.
Arsenic, is it clear?
Yeah, but Max, you're supposed to explain what does it mean in Russian, but not only the punishment.
Okay.
Well,
The Russian way of thinking, of course.
Yeah.
First, you go to jail if you don't do it.
Okay.
But
Yes, okay. Фальсификация — это любые манипуляции с данными, то есть, которые не обоснованы. Допустим, да, если ты обрабатываешь какой-то спектр, он шумный, то есть математические операции, которые ты можешь применять, чтобы сгладить шумы, то есть где-то что точно, но ты не изменяешь при этом реальные данные. То есть ты просто выбираешь уровень шумов, допустим. Да, это обоснованная манипуляция с данными. Есть, допустим, ты взял, измерил, у тебя там где-нибудь экспоненциальная зависимость, а ты хочешь линейную. Ты взял и поменял. Да? Ну, то есть это фальсификация. То есть ты подделал данные. Ты сделал эксперимент, но но изменил данные. Фабрикация — это когда, я уже объяснял, то есть когда ты заявляешь, что ты сделал эксперимент, но на самом деле ты никогда его не делал. Это фабрикация результата. Ну и плагиат — это если ты взял чужую работу и поставил на ней свое имя, и это включает, что, как многие профессора в ТПУ могут сказать, зачем писать что-то своими словами, если все идеально и правильно написано в книжке. Просто скопировал и поставил цитату. Так нельзя делать, это плагиат. Вот.
Нет, цитаты-то можно делать.
Это там есть объем, но скорее всего, то есть тебе надо все писать своими словами. Что значит цитата? Ну, то есть если ты скопировал и поставил в конце ссылку, это такое. Если дают, конечно, ты цитату прям поставил, то можно, но тоже там есть ограничения на объем.
Ну, плагиат не только, наверное, распространяется на брать что-то из литературы, но это просто воровать какие-то моменты, там, где-то ты у кого-то посмотрел, взял, сам сделал, потом опубликовал.
Цитату надо грамотно по грамматике в кавычки просто ставить. Тогда будет понятно, что это цитата.
Ну, да.
Я думаю...
Да, я про ссылку имел в виду. Ну, короче. И про то, что Сергей говорит, это тоже нехорошо. Просто здесь Этот вопрос сложнее.
Я не знаю, можно ли отнести к плагиату такой вариант, когда ты на базе какой-то лаборатории снимаешь, тебе снимают, например, данные, ты их используешь, публикуешь и не указываешь, например, авторов исследования.
Это не плагиат, но это тоже нарушение этики другое. Так, естественно, тоже делать нельзя. Просто
Ну, смотря как вы договорились, если ты пошел за это заплатил, то как бы обычно то, что платное, ты нигде их людей не обязан указывать.
Это понятно.
Thanks. Is it clear for everyone, right?
I do not agree with the point that when we say about fabrication, when we process the data. So I think it's
falsification.
So when you intend to show something, so yes, it's fabrication, but sometimes people don't understand and how to make. When you do ramen, for example, you need to remove the background. So how to do the background, how to do it properly, yes. Right? So it sometimes it will not. I cannot say that there's formula that we can say, okay, I will remove background and completely the same at everything and will be right. So maybe beginners. So for the people who don't understand, so I could not call it fabrication, that I would call some misunderstanding.
It's falsification, not fabrication. That's falsification.
Okay.
So, yes, that's the thing. That's the thing. That's why I say this when the skills I didn't know that it's falsification, and that could take us a bit of time to explain to go through this, and we are finished time. So let me address this point if I can in a fast way. In Raman, how can it happen? When you subtract the background, you have a large background in the signal. What happens? What can happen to the spectrum if you don't do it properly? What gets affected when you subtract the background?
It can affect to the peak position, to
the peak position, yes.
Width and the intensity.
Yes, the intensity ratio, exactly.
Yes.
So you know that. Or
yes.
If you make a non-linear background, you can make peaks appear where they are not, or you can also even make peaks disappear.
Yes, of course.
That's falsification.
It depends on your vision, how you see the data, right?
No. If you see in the raw data that there is no peak, and you make a crazy non-linear background with
of course, yeah. But if there is really small peak, it's small peak, and we see it's small.
Well, then we comes to what is called statistically relevant.
Yes, so
you need to go above the signal to noise ratio
yeah.
to tell that there is something there.
Yes, of course.
Anyway, the one way to cure, how can you cure yourself from this or to minimize the effect of this part is show raw image, raw spectra, and show the process data, show both. And that's an easy way to tell you, okay, yes, if there was a problem or not. And then with experience, you will identify these issues. Okay, guys, unfortunately, time is over. There were other things I wanted to tell you, but this was my main objective, to tell you the main things you should not do. I didn't want to leave this without giving you also the tools. I mean, some ways that I typically use, some strategies, but life is too short. We have just a couple of minutes left. Maybe I will see if it's worth telling you how in my system I'm ready to, how my system takes all these things into account, how my strategy, and I can tell you maybe if it's interesting for you for the next time, how to avoid falling into rabbit holes how to avoid wasting your time, how to plan your experiments. So there are other things that are necessary for you to know. And why do I say it's necessary? Because you guys are under pressure to get results, to get meaningful results. And if you don't have the tools, if you don't have the tips, the strategy, how to get results, excellent results, top level results, without cheating, without falsifying, without plagiarizing, then I'm just telling you what you cannot do, but I'm not giving the tools. So I think it's incomplete. So that's why maybe not, very likely there will be a second part of this into the strategic thinking, how to, yeah, but that's a completely different story. Is there any question, guys? Any other question about what we discussed today? Any comment?
Can you please repeat the difference between reproducibility and statistically reliable results? Something
Yes.
like this. What's
Yes.
the difference?
Yes, sure. Ilya can do that. Ilya, Anya, Sergey, Max, any of these guys can do that. And Roshan, please do it in Roshan.
Ну, статистическое — это когда, грубо говоря, ты только какую-то часть всего процесса воспроизводишь. А воспроизводимость, когда ты идешь от начала и до конца, то есть от стадии получения сырых материалов и заканчиваешь обработкой эксперимента, представлением результатов. Как-то так, наверное.
20 seconds. I will tell that in the chat also. Okay, guys, thank you very much for this. If you have any questions also in the chat, okay, feel free to say, open up your mind about this discussion. Let's keep the discussion on this. This is a very important topic. Bye all of you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.